Hey everybody, good afternoon. Welcome back. Just getting the stream started, but actually we don't have a lot of time for class, so I guess we'll go straight into it. Let me get my glasses. Sorry, 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Good to see you guys. It's 2:30 now, so welcome back to class. Let me just get things started with a couple of quick questions to sort of make sure we're all on the same page. Did anyone happen to notice, can you confirm the receipt of my titanium message from, I think it was Friday, when I sent everyone the study guide for the midterm exam? Just let me know that you got that and that you've been able to open the document and everything. So I'll just start with that. Kind of want to make sure we're all good with the study guide for the midterm. So I've sent a few different messages in the past few days. One of them from Friday would have been this midterm study guide. So just let me know. Okay, good. You've got that study guide. Thanks, Spencer. And so if you have it, everybody has it. It's a class-wide mail delivery system. So if you haven't yet had a chance to look at it, I would tell you go ahead and whenever you're ready, go ahead and start looking through the study guide questions and topics. That's what we're going to use on Wednesday this week when we resume. And we'll go into the review session on Wednesday. We'll go over as many of those questions on the study guide as possible. I'm going to select from that study guide the list of questions that I will place on the midterm exam next week. So a week from today, we have our midterm exam. I've now finished grading your first essay. I just let you guys know that this afternoon, so I kind of had to work through the weekend and do a little bit more this morning, but now that's ready. So anybody who's looking for their score or grade comments on the first essay, I just invite you to email me. And the way that I like to report grades back is through a personalized email. So whenever I get your message, I'll make sure to reply to you. Just give me at most 2 days to give you a response, just because I have a lot of other classes and assignments that I'm managing right now. But no later than within 48-hour window, you'll get your reply if you're seeking your grade or comments on the first essay. So obviously the next thing coming forward is our midterm exam Monday next week. We've got a week to go until then. So between then, today we have a lesson to finish up the trolley problem, and then Wednesday we have a review session. Monday next week we have the exam, and then you have one more lecture, one more lecture next Wednesday before we break for spring break. And then we'll come back from spring break and we'll just be continuing on the next topics and essays from there. So I also sent you guys last night some supplemental videos and resources that you can use to help you understand the trolley problem essay a little bit more in depth. And there's also some helpful, I think, discussion in that video lecture that I mailed you from YouTube of ethical theory and that kind of stuff. So it's helpful if you get a chance. There's about 1 hour of viewing that I sent. So if you have some time at any point, go ahead and do yourself a favor, take a look at that. It'll probably help you understand things at least a little more. Okay, so as usual, if you are at the meeting, find the time to leave a comment at some point so that I can use that for some type of informal attendance records. And all right, so I guess that's all clear and good. Just to repeat some of the main points I just mentioned, you have the study guide. If you haven't yet looked at it, please go in and make sure you check your school emails, and you'll see that I sent it through Titanium on Friday. That's the study guide. Those are the questions, some of them that I'm going to use on the test. There's 43 or so questions on that list. I'm obviously not going to ask all of them. I'm going to take like a set of 10 or 11 of them, and then you'll have to answer 7 or 8 of those on the day of the exam itself. But you can get started preparing your sample answers, notes, and review materials. Just come on Wednesday next class ready to talk about the topics on the study guide, and we'll help each other go through that study guide and be as prepared as possible. Other than that, the first essay is now graded. Those that want their score on it, I'm just asking you to please send me an email, and you'll see any further details about that in the announcement that I posted this afternoon. Okay then, so one last lecture before we start getting into review session and midterm exam, and that is to finish up this whole paper about the trolley problem by Judith Thomson. So the author, once again, Judith Thomson. The essay from 1985, simply titled The Trolley Problem. Okay, so let me just bring you back up to speed, and we'll try and finish out this discussion of trolley problem. Okay. So I'm just going to take you as far as I think we got last time. Trolley Problem is an essay by Thomson here, which explores puzzling intuitions that we seem to have about killing versus letting die. Now, when we are greeted with two different examples in which a subject can intervene into a situation to prevent 5 deaths, but their intervention would lead to the death of 1, it seems that the audience's response in these two pair of cases doesn't line up and is inconsistent. So the trolley problem is to try and make sense of our puzzling and somewhat inconsistent moral intuitions concerning killing versus letting die. Now, question for you guys. Did I get all the way through the discussion and the explanation of the Trolley Driver case? You could just let me know. Did I talk all about Trolley Driver? I think I talked about Trolley Driver, but just confirming with you from our Wednesday meeting of last week. Trolley Problem, Thomson. We talked about the driver scenario. Let me know. While you're formulating your response to that, let me just put something on the board about it. Okay, so there's the essay author and date. The essay begins with a description of this case called Trolley Driver. Okay, thanks, Kirsten. So Trolley Driver goes like this. It's a hypothetical scenario. In the scenario, we are told there's a trolley. This trolley is speeding along on a path. Here's the driver in there. It's speeding along this path, straight ahead on the path. You have 5 people. Okay, so this is bad because the trolley on its path and given its velocity, it's going to strike into these 5 people and kill all 5 of them that are on the track. So there's only one option to prevent this because the brakes cannot stop. So you're not going to be able to stop the forward path of the trolley, but there is a diversion to another stretch of the track. He has a switch that if he switches it, it goes in this way. So it won't hit 5 people. That sounds better. Only problem is there is 1 person over there. But 1 is less than 5 times less. So when we're talking about human life and people dying or surviving, the question that people are asked is this. Suppose the trolley driver flips the switch so that the trolley goes instead over in this direction and it does not hit 5 and it does hit and kill the 1. The audience is asked, would that be morally permissible or not? And the overwhelming reaction of most survey participants is that it is not wrong for the switch to switch. I guess what people are feeling is that if the trolley is going to kill somebody anyway, shouldn't it kill less? No one should think that it's wrong to just try and cause it to kill less, or at least that's the overwhelming response that most people have. So takeaway is this. If this trolley driver scenario is presented to an audience of whatever size, almost everybody says flipping the switch so the trolley goes there is not wrong. That's not wrong. Maybe some people even think you should do it or that it's an obligation. But very few people would say that's actually wrong. Okay, so nobody thinks it's wrong to switch the switch here. Point taken? Okay. Now, on the other hand, though, there's a second case. And the trolley problem really only comes into view when we compare the way the audience reacts to this example with the way that the audience reacts to another example called transplant. Okay, so here's case 2. It's called transplant. And we talked briefly about the transplant situation in earlier meetings when we discussed some ethical objections to utilitarian theory. Anyway, as a refresher, here's how transplant goes. You got 5 people, all of them sick and suffering from various organ failures of vital organs. So that's not good. They all need a transplant of different organs to survive. Suppose here's one guy who needs a heart transplant. Another one needs a liver transplant, kidney transplant, the other kidney, and maybe the lung. So each one of them needs a different, very important vital organ. And in each case, if the transplant is not secured within a reasonable short time period, they're going to succumb to the organ failure they've got and they're going to die. So they want transplants to survive. They go to this doctor guy. There he is. And they're asking, can you find us some type of donor, some type of transplant that will be matched so they can save our lives? One thing I can't forget to mention, although there's 5 of them, they all have the same kind of very rare blood type. Why? How? It's a coincidence. So there you go. Call it XXX blood. That's what they all have, which is very hard to find anybody with XXX blood. But anyway, they've all got it. And that means that if there was even just one donor, which was a suitable blood match of the same blood type, then the one donor could be used to save all 5 lives, because basically they need different organs and they have the same common blood type. So suppose you had one suitable donor match that was a triple X. They could basically gut this person, take all the different organs and split them off into 5 people and save 5 lives at the cost of, well, I don't know if it's the cost of 1 life, but through the use of 1 donor. So suppose that he's trying to find a match to that blood type, looking through the record, the doctor, trying to find someone with the same kind of blood, but he doesn't see anybody. So he's ready to tell them, I can't do anything, I tried my best, but I can't see anybody who's out there that's matching your blood type, so unfortunately I can't help. But just as he's about to say all that to them, in from the street into his office walks this person, a young, healthy person. It's like you, okay? Or me, or any of those students in this class, but it's just a young, healthy person with basically no physical problems or health problems. So why are they at the doctor? Just a normal physical checkup, trying to be proactive about their health, not because they have any current issues of any kind. So they're just coming in to see what's up with their health and do a physical. And he's got a free moment, the doctor. So he takes a look at this person's medical information. And what do you think would be your guess as to where our little story goes next? The doctor was looking for a suitable donor match, couldn't find one, about to give up, but in from the street comes a young, healthy person with no big problems health-wise, and the doctor discovers something. And what do you think is the discovery of the doctor pertaining to this new patient? Just let me know in the chat if you could guess our next little plot twist. I'm sure one of you guys knows it. Film watchers, lovers of fiction. Ah, yes, that's right, David, and Ismail, and others. It's this guy who has that triple X blood. So he's got the match. He's got the same matching blood type. So, okay, he's thinking then, you already know what he's thinking. Well, I mean, if this guy has the blood type, maybe he could be the donor. So he talks to him and he says, so, okay, look, really weird thing to say or ask, but I'm just going to put it out there because why not, all right? So here's the deal. Let me tell you, in the next room over, the next ward, there's 5 patients. They're all suffering from types of different organ failure. And they're looking for transplants to save their lives. There's 5 of them. The weird thing is they all have the same matching blood type. But even weirder is that's a very rare blood type. It's hard to find. So anyway, I'm trying to find anybody. Because if I could find one person, the fact that they all need different types of organs would make it possible for even one donor to serve and provide all 5 organs. So I was looking, couldn't find anybody. But then, sir, you know, you came in off the street, and it's almost like just a divine intervention. You've come in, and lo and behold, it turns out you actually have this triple X blood type. So I was going to just ask you this. Okay, point blank, what do you say? Would you be okay with me just taking all your organs out and giving them to 5 people? If that happens, look, there's no way you could ever survive. This definitely would be the ultimate sacrifice. But if you let us do it, then 5 people are going to live instead of you. And if you don't let us do it, they're all going to die. And yeah, you'll survive. But I mean, that's not as many people surviving. That's like a -4, you know, 5 dead, 1 alive versus 5 alive, 1 dead. So, you know, you'll be a hero forever to all their families and friends, but it would cost you your life. So I know this is a weird question, but what do you think? Would that be cool or no? Now, if this patient is anything like me or you, then we already know what the response would be. What? No, sorry, absolutely not. No way am I going to lay down my life for these 5 people, even though, you know, I have no problem with those people. I'm sure they're great human beings, but I have my own life to live. I have every right to be alive. Even if my organs could be used to save a greater number of people's lives, I would never be okay with that. I'm sorry, I can't help. So look, now I've got a question for you. Well, what if the doctor right after that is like, oh yeah, okay, fine. Then he just kills him, takes the organs without his permission, and gives them to the 5 people. Well, would that be wrong or not? If the doctor then just, you know, took him out and took the organs. Forget permission. I'm taking those organs, and you're dead. And now I've got them, and I'm giving them to 5 people. Would that be wrong or not? That's just a question for you. I don't know. What is your opinion? I think you'll be in good company because everybody has the same opinion usually on this. Ismail, right. That would be wrong. Okay, it would be definitely wrong. So don't be shy, everybody. 100% almost of everyone thinks that's wrong. Deeply wrong. Fundamentally wrong. Okay. But now we have our trolley problem to think about. And here is the real question that's starting to come into focus. Why, though? Okay, here's the question. It's a why question. The trolley problem is the question, why is it that most people say that this action of switching the tracks is not wrong? But this action of taking the transplant victim's organs and giving them to 5, that is wrong. The question to be answered is, what's the difference-making factor such that everyone seems to have different reactions to the 2 examples? Because why that's a puzzle or whatever is because although the 2 cases are different on the surface, there are some basic structural similarities between them too. Okay, now how are the 2 cases at all similar? Well, behind the obvious differences, here are the similarities. In both examples, there's 5 people that are facing an imminent risk of death from some cause. And in both examples, there's one other individual on the scene who could intervene in what's happening, and if they intervene, it will avoid the death of 5 and lead or cause the death of 1. But in this example, the intervention which prevents the 5 deaths and instead causes 1 is an intervention that almost everyone says is not wrong, and that is okay. But in the transplant scenario, the intervention of the doctor, which will cause 1 person's death but prevent 5, everyone says this is wrong. So the real question then, theoretically and ethically, is what is this morally relevant factor that distinguishes the 2 cases? What is triggering everyone to say this is wrong but not this? That's really the question, okay? Now, there was an author that came about 20 or 30 years before Judith Thomson did, and that's another mid-century woman, American philosopher named Philippa Foot. Philippa Foot talked about the trolley problem prior to Thomson back in the 50s and 60s, and she thought she had solved it once and for all. But Thomson is here in 1985 saying, not so fast, I'm bringing the problem back from the dead, because Thomson says that Foot's solution doesn't really work in the end. So the next thing to show you guys is what the author Philippa Foot thought the solution was to our question, why are people having different responses to the 2 cases? Talk about her reaction and her solution, and then Thomson will try and explain why that still doesn't solve the problem. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next is the so-called Philippa Foot solution to the trolley problem. But keep in mind, where this is going ultimately is Thomson's going to take this so-called solution and then just show that it's not really the right solution. Okay, so, but what is the solution? Okay, so we're talking about this female woman philosopher, Philippa Foot, very unique name. But here was her so-called solution to the problem. The problem, again, of explain why people think that the one case is something wrong to do and not the other. So here's why she thought that people have that reaction. So she says the reason, which explains the different responses of the audience, has to do with 2 moral principles that she thinks everyone assumes to be true and intuitively agrees with. So I'm going to write these 2 moral principles here, which are supposed to serve as the solution. The first one is this: it is worse to kill 5 than to kill 1. Okay, so that just says something simple, I guess. It's worse to kill 5 than it is to kill 1. I mean, don't overthink it too much. Killing is bad, right? We can all agree with that. If killing is bad, all this is saying is that the more of it that happens, the worse that it is. So, I mean, killing 1 person is fundamentally terrible and immoral, but of course, it's even worse to kill 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So if you're only given this much information, someone's going to either kill 5 or 1. What would be worse? You already know that it's definitely worse when 1 kills 5. So simple enough. If those are the only 2 possibilities, killing 5 is the worst way to go than 1. On the other hand, though, a second moral principle that's now stated afterwards is this: that it is worse to kill 1 than to let 5 die. Okay? Okay, so the second principle is claiming the following, that killing is so bad, like being the direct cause of someone's death, someone dying at your hand through your actions, that is worse than not intervening and allowing 5 people to die from something else. Okay, so letting 5 people die is not the same thing as killing anybody. It's like letting 5 people die could just be not getting involved in a situation that was going to kill them, right? So instead of running up to the burning car and dragging people out, you just don't get involved. That's not you killing the person, but it is allowing the person to die from some existing problem that they're now facing. So the claim here is that killing is so bad that when you are the killer, that's worse than remaining uninvolved in the situation which claims 5 lives. In other words, letting 5 die. So if you had to choose between being the cause of people dying versus refraining from preventing 5 people from dying, the worst thing for you to do would be to kill a person instead of letting 5 die. So if these 2 principles are true, as Foot has suggested, then she thinks that that solves the problem, because let's consider the choice of the individuals in the driver scenario versus the transplant scenario. What is the choice of the trolley driver? The driver of the trolley that's about to go forward and could hit 5 or could hit 1. Well, he has a pretty bad set of options, doesn't he? One option is, let this trolley continue, and if it does, I'm the driver of the trolley and I'm killing 5 people with this trolley that I'm driving. But if he flips the switch, then he doesn't kill 5. Instead, by means of the switch being flipped and diverting the path, now he just kills 1. So what people seem to respond to when they say it's not wrong is just that he's trying to avoid doing the worst thing, because on his current trajectory, he's gonna ultimately kill 5 people, and that's way worse than just killing 1. So switching tracks means that you switch to the thing that's not as bad. But what's the choice, though, of the transplant surgeon? Can anybody tell me that? If the surgeon acts or doesn't act, what would be the results? I'm just asking you to parse out the choice situation that faces the surgeon in the transplant scenario. He could either what or what, based on whether he, takes this person's life. He could, obviously, what's one of the options that is given in that hypothetical? Just tell me that in the chat. So it's let 5 die. That's one case, David. But I was going to start with the other part, but that's fine. He could let 5 die, because if he doesn't operate on the one guy that's healthy and take the organs, then what causes the death of 5? Not the doctor. They die of natural causes. They die of organ failure, right? They die in no way through a killer doctor, you see? So if they died because he refrains from operating, he's not the cause of death. So it's basically, yeah, you guys are right. It's either that or kill the 1. But killing 1 is so bad that that would be worse than letting 5 die. So maybe we've got our answer here. When your choice is take a life or just let people pass away from whatever problem they're going to face, it's worse for you to take a life. But if the choice facing you is take more lives or fewer lives, you'd better take fewer, because it's bad to kill, and the least amount that you kill, the better. Okay? So maybe that looks like it's a nice solution, but Thomson, as I was telling you guys, she snatches that solution right away from you. Like, nope, sorry, not quite. And here's the way that she revives the problem after this suggested solution of Philippa Foot. She says this, the problem is that if we simply make a little modification to the original trolley driver scenario, if we just tweak that scenario a little bit, then we get right back to the position we were in at the first place, where the trolley problem comes back. So to show why the trolley problem endures, even despite this attempt to solve it, we have to talk about another trolley situation, a different modified trolley scenario. And this one is called bystander at the switch. So I'm going to erase Foot's attempted solution to make space for the bystander at the switch example. Okay, so here we go, bystander at the switch. Thought I had a marker over here that might have fallen off, but whatever, that's fine. So bystander at the switch. Okay, so it's similar in some ways to the previous trolley example. We have a trolley. Within the trolley, there's the driver here. And the trolley is on a forward course on this track, heading straight toward 5 people that it would kill. Okay, and as before, there's a diversion to a separate stretch of the track where 1 person is placed. And here's the difference, though. In this version of our trolley case, we say that the driver is actually incapacitated, unconscious, right? So here are some X's where the eyes ought to be, to just show you that this person is blacked out right now. So the driver can't hit any switch, and nobody else has access to the control room in the trolley. So it looks like this group is just doomed, because nothing can be done to divert the trolley path. But not so fast. There actually is one thing that can be done. So here's a bystander standing by. This person is in no way involved on the trolley, is not on the trolley, is not driving it, of course, just a person walking around in the local area. But suppose as they're on their nice little afternoon walk, they see this switch, and it's clearly labeled and marked. And what it says is, emergency remote override switch for trolley. Flip in case of need to switch tracks. Okay? Now, it's a hypothetical scenario, guys, so you just have to like imagine certain things are known for sure. Like he knows the switch works, he knows exactly how it functions, and he's also aware of the unfolding events up here with respect to the trolley. So basically the only real change in driver versus bystander is who could pull the switch. In the first iteration of the trolley scenario, it's the driver himself or herself or themselves that could make this trolley switch tracks. But now with him unable to do so, it falls to the bystander who's on the scene and has this access to the switch that will cause the same outcome. So the question is then repeated to the audience. If Mr. Bystander flips the switch, would that be okay, or do you think that would be wrong? So question for you. If the bystander hits the switch and sends the trolley away from 5 people so it only hits 1 instead, do you think that that's okay, or is it not okay, or do you find that that person has done something immoral if they flip that switch, or does it not strike you as immoral? Just your own view. The bystander, just asking if it's wrong for him to flip the switch or not. Wrong or not wrong? You saying, David, okay to switch, and good, thanks for your response. And just generally, I'll tell you that's what most people say. If you look at the, if you watch the video, for example, that I sent you guys last night, you'll see that in actual real-time surveys that are conducted with big auditorium class sizes and stuff, it's up in the 90 percentile. Like almost everybody thinks that that's not wrong. So basically, people are not fazed by this slight adjustment from driver to bystander. The overwhelming reaction of most majority of people is that it's not wrong for the driver to switch the switch, and it's also not really wrong for the bystander to do it either. Because in both cases, all we're trying to do is not allow the trolley to kill as many people as possible, and instead to hit a much smaller number. So anyway, that's just data for you. It is a little bit of an unfortunate situation, Ismail, I guess, if you're in the position of this one guy, yeah. You're like, well, at least I'm not on that other part of the trolley where a bunch of people are going to get hit. But I don't know, Ishmael. I mean, maybe he would also have a kind of poignant thought, like, well, better me than them. You know, it's too many people there on the other side. But anyway, you know, that's kind of difficult to imagine actually thinking. You know, if you look at some of the memes that have been created about the trolley problem, there's millions of them. It's very funny. They have a bunch of different spin-offs of the scenario, and one of them is kind of like a little trippy, where you imagine that the person with the switch is the guy over here. And so he could switch the trolley to him. And then the question is, how many people would have to be on the other side for that to be the thing that you would do? Do you flip the switch if there's a billion people on the other side and they're all going to get hit by the trolley? Anyway, that's aside from the point. That's not in the essay itself, but I'm just telling you there's a lot of discussion in the pop culture about the trolley problem and various permutations of the original example. But anyway, and then Tina, what are you saying? What if the one person was your loved one compared to 5 strangers? Yeah. See, when you start building in additional features, then it complicates the scenario even more. I would say we can't have any special assumptions about identities of the people. We will just assume that they're all of equal status and they're just human beings. No further information is given. So you're not supposed to think like these are 5 murderers. This is like, you know, your best friend or something. Therefore, flipping the equation or the mental calculation a little bit, like assigning different levels of value to the lives. Let's just say all the lives are equally valuable, and they're just human beings with no further, you know, detail. Anyway, though, the point that we had reached now was just to note, this is just data for you. Most people don't think it's wrong for the bystander to flip the switch either. But now let's consider how that undermines and destroys the effectiveness of Foot's attempted solution. Because Foot said that we can explain away the different reactions people have by noting that in the case of the driver, he's facing kill 5 or kill 1, but the surgeon is facing kill 1 or let 5 die. But when we replace driver with bystander, there's no longer that difference, okay? Because question, what's the choice of Mr. Bystander then? If the bystander gets involved in this situation and touches the switch, then he's the one that causes the trolley to go over here, and so then he effectively is responsible for this 1 death, killing 1. But if he doesn't touch the trolley switch, you know, he's like, you know, I'm not going to touch this thing. I don't want to be a part of this. then what's the cause of these 5 people's death? Is it the bystander? Not really. It's the runaway trolley and the guy who's driving it. So what's the choice then of Mr. Bystander? It looks like it is kill one or what? Question though. Mr. Bystander, kill one or other option. If he doesn't kill the person by touching the switch, then he's, well, not to worry, Ishmael, but I would still need to get to this thing though. The choice facing Mr. Bystander. It's this or that. It's kill one or let 5 die. That's right. Yeah, not getting involved is letting the 5 die, okay? But we were told in Foot's attempted solution that if it's kill one versus let 5 die, it's worse to kill one. But that doesn't square with the intuitions of the audience in reaction to this case combined with transplant, because everyone thinks transplant is definitely wrong, but nobody thinks bystander is wrong. Nonetheless, bystander and surgeon seem to be facing the same choice scenario. Kill one by getting involved, or don't get involved and 5 will just die from whatever they already had problems going on. But though the parallel has been reestablished between bystander and transplant, it's only bystander where people think it's okay to do that, not transplant. So we still have this question that's looming and we still have not quite gotten the answer. But this is the true trolley problem according to Thomson. So let me put it in the chat so it's very clear to you. Trolley problem. This question, now that we've finally gotten the 2 scenarios on the table that she thinks are the most important. The trolley problem is this question: why do most people feel that the action of Mr. Bystander is permissible, but that the action of surgeon is impermissible? Okay, so you see it there typed out, hopefully clearly written in the chat, and that is the essential trolley problem for us. The trolley problem started as the juxtaposition of audience reaction to driver and transplant, but after Foot's attempted solution and Thomson's modification of driver to bystander, Thomson now asserts that the real problem that we are trying to solve is this theoretical question: why then do people feel that bystander is not doing anything wrong, but surgeon is? What's the difference basically between bystander and surgeon, which is leading people to these different, inconsistent, incompatible moral reactions? Okay, so we have to find that answer and we're still looking for it. So another attempted solution is mentioned just now, okay? Basically, here's what's going to go on in the next couple moments as I discuss the article. Thomson discusses a second possible solution that she thinks can be attributed to the ideas of Kant, Immanuel Kant, Kantian ethics that we've studied. So I'll try and explain the so-called Kantian solution next. Unfortunately, even the Kantian solution, Thomson will say, does not work either. So she's going to set up a second attempted solution just to sort of knock it down. And then finally, after that second failed solution is reported on, she'll hit us with what she says is the real solution, Thomson's solution. So she thinks she solved it, and her method here is to first present the problem, show 2 failed attempts at solving it, and then to hit us with the real thing, the real answer that she thinks she's come up with at the end. So one more failed attempt that we got to work through that, and that's the Kantian solution to the trolley problem. So let me write about it over here. Okay, so the so-called Kantian style solution to the problem. Okay, guys, now we studied Kant. There's a lot of depth and subtlety and sophistication to the words and writings of Immanuel Kant. But I just want you guys to help remind the class of something very fundamental and basic about him. In Kant's philosophy, he says that your moral obligations are governed by the categorical imperative. And the categorical imperative is a moral principle that we can use to discover what the moral law requires or forbids. He said that there were 2 basic versions of the categorical imperative. So I'm just asking you to use your memory or your notes or both to tell me what is the second version of Kant's categorical imperative. I'll give you some little hints, but please write in the chat the full thing. It's something about don't treat people a certain type of way. But what is that way that he says you should never treat a human being as a blah, blah, blah? Who could tell me? So Kant, you know, the philosophy of Kant and his moral philosophy. Categorical imperative, version 2. Do not treat other human beings as what, but always as what. So if you can fill in those blanks, then we'll be able to say what the solution is. Just giving you a second to collect your thoughts, but yeah, just do let me know. Okay, so Tina, do not ever treat a human as a means to an end, but always as an end in itself. Yes, correct. So you're not supposed to use people as tools or instruments to be exploited or manipulated in the pursuit of some goal that you must have or may have, right? So that's why Kant would say, stealing from someone to feed other people or whatever, that's wrong because it uses their wealth as a means to the redistribution of it, which is the end being pursued. So anyway then, Kant says you're never supposed to use anyone as a means. And that might be the solution according to some, because some would say that it is only in the transplant situation where the victim is used as a means. In the bystander scenario, arguably, the one victim that will be hit if the switch is flipped is not really being used as a means. So let's try and make that somewhat clear. Kantian solution. In transplant, the one victim, the one person who you would take their organs, is used as a means to an end. But in bystander, in all the trolley examples, bystander, driver, whatever, but we'll just say in bystander, the one victim that would be claimed if the trolley switches tracks is not used as a means to an end. So maybe this is our ultimate explanation of why most people find the transplant action wrong, but not the bystander's action or potential action. So what's triggering the feeling that it's wrong to do what the surgeon does? Because if the surgeon does that, he uses the victim as a means to an end. And why do people feel that what the bystander can do is not wrong? It's because if the bystander flips the switch, he's not really using the victim as a means to an end. So why would that be so? Let me try and explain. Thomson gives us this little conceptual test to use to determine whether an action that involves someone else uses them as a means. Here's what she says you should consider. Ask yourself, what if the person that you're involved in the interaction with was to disappear, like vanish, abracadabra, magic, disappears at the last moment, right before you take the action? What if the person was to disappear right as you're about to act? Question, would you still be able to achieve the goal of your action or not? Okay, so it takes a little bit of mental gymnastics, but you got to think through these scenarios right now as I ask you some basic questions. So going back to the bystander and the driver case, whatever trolley case that you think you can mention in your mind, suppose that at the last moment, so someone hits the switch, whether it's the driver, whether it's the bystander, they hit the switch, so now trolley's going over in that other direction, and it's bearing down on the one person. I want you to imagine this. What if at the very last moment, right as the trolley's about to make the impact, this person somehow magically just disappears off of the trolley track, pops up like 10 feet away over to the side, out of the way of the trolley? Okay, can you imagine that? Like they disappear, or you ever watch cartoons, like slips down into one of those Bugs Bunny rabbit holes and the trolley passes over their head and they see it go past and they're surviving. Okay, so I'm asking you this deceptively simple question. What if the person was to disappear off the tracks at the last moment? Would we still save those other 5 individuals by switching the tracks or no? So that's the question. If the one guy disappeared at the last minute, right before impact, would we still have prevented the death of the other 5 by switching the trolley path? Yes, we would have, Tina. That is correct. I mean, it's kind of in a way a weird thing to imagine someone disappears. But if they did, then the trolley would, you think, just pass on in that other direction and it wouldn't hit anybody. In a way, wouldn't you much prefer that that person was somehow absent from the track, because if they were, then you could have saved 5 lives by switching tracks with no human cost at all, right? The only reason one guy's gonna die is because he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. But you really don't hope for his death. It's just something that you can foresee happening if you switch the trolley's tracks. But what you're really intending here is not the death of anybody. You're just intending the diversion of the trolley away from this big group of 5 people. And so if that one individual was somehow to disappear at the last moment, then you still would have achieved the real point of what you were doing, which was causing the trolley not to strike 5. So long story short, if the one guy on the track disappears at the last minute by whatever, God or magic or something, then you still would have saved the other 5 people's lives. So that makes it seem as though this guy's not really being used as a means. Although his death is part of what happens when you switch the trolley's track, if his death didn't happen and if he wasn't on the way of the trolley, then so much better it would be, because you'd have saved lives and you wouldn't have had to hurt anybody at all. Okay, so him being on the track is not really necessary to your life-saving intent. In fact, to the contrary, it's kind of like unfortunate, isn't it, that he's even there? You don't want him in harm's way, but since he is there, it's preferable to harming an even bigger number. Now let's go into the other example, the transplant thing, okay? I want you to run that same kind of thinking back. So suppose we've got our mad surgeon, whatever you want to call him, and he's decided, I'm going to take this man's life and I'm going to use the organs to save the other 5. So suppose that right as he's prepared to do the deed and he's got a scalpel, he's about to do some incisions and take the organs. Suppose that at that last moment, poof, off the operating table, just abracadabra, the guy's gone. Okay, so if the one victim in transplant was to disappear at the last moment, would we have still saved the 5 lives of the other individuals or no? Would the 5 have lived or died if our transplant donor, well, he's not a donor, so our transplant victim vanished? If they vanished and disappeared right before the doctor's going to cut out the organs, would we have been able to save the 5 lives? Yeah, clearly they would have died. There's no way we would have saved the lives without his organs. So if he's somehow absent at the last moment or he's not present, then we don't have the body parts that are needed for the safety and the survival of the other 5. So that looks like he is used as a means in a very, very direct and obvious way. His body parts are being used as a means of survival for 5 other people. So it's not at all like his death is somehow just an undesirable side effect of trying to prevent these people's lives being lost. The death of the victim in transplant is essential to securing the organs that you would need for the 5 people. So he's used as a means, no question about it. If he wasn't there, you couldn't have saved 5 people without his body parts. But in the bystander or driver cases, the one guy on the other side of the track, it's not really his death that anyone wants. It's just that it's going to happen if you try and switch the trolley tracks. But if he wasn't there, that would be even better. So his death is not really an intended, desired outcome. But in the case of transplant, no one can deny that this man's death is what one tries to do to get the organs that they're looking for. So have we solved the problem now? Bystander, someone dies, but they're not used as a means. Transplant, someone dies, and they are used as a means, and that triggers everyone to say that's wrong. Well, it looks like a solution, I think, but like I told you a moment ago, Thomson, once again, just snatches that away from us. What's the phrase? Snatches victory out of the jaws of defeat, or something like that. But anyway, she says, no, actually not so fast. This isn't going to solve it either. And the way that she makes the point that it still is not a successful solution is by creating yet another variation on the trolley case. So we're going to have to look at yet another trolley-based scenario, which will undermine the effectiveness of the Kantian solution. And then after I show you that, we'll be able to talk about the real solution that Thomson thinks solves the problem. So here's the problem change, or the example varied once again. What we have right here is called loop. Okay, loop. So you've been imagining, so let me just draw some things to get loop started. You have this trolley. You have your passed out driver here. It's a forward path towards 5. Okay, got those 5 people in the oncoming path of the trolley. And as before, there's a separate stretch of trolley over here. But before I continue drawing the picture, let's mention some stuff. In bystander and driver, the other 2 original cases, you have imagined that when the switch is flipped, by the way, here's a bystander with the switch. Okay, you've imagined that when the switch is flipped, the trolley is sent in this direction, and yeah, it'll plow over a person and kill him, but it'll just continue going off in that direction, and that the two different stretches of trolley track never loop and connect again at the end. But suppose that we change that and we do make it into a loop. Okay, so suppose the structure of the track is like this. And suppose that the one guy up here, no easy way to say this, I guess, but let's just say this is a large gentleman, okay? Okay, so with this loop version now, here's the state of play. If the guy here does not touch this switch, I'm not involved, here's what will happen. Trolley will go forward, won't be switched, so it'll hit these 5 people, and it'll kill all 5 of them, but the 5 people of just regular size combined together are sufficiently massive that they will block the continued forward progress of the trolley. So they'll basically stop it from continuing around the loop and just killing this other large guy from the other side. On the other hand, if the bystander hits the switch, that does send the trolley in this direction, and it'll hit this large gentleman and kill him, but he's so large that in this description of the case, he blocks the trolley from continuing around the corner to kill the 5 people from the other side in their case. So we've got the same situation pretty much, except with one little minor change, and that is that the track forms a loop, and this big guy would block it from going in the other direction if it's hitting him, and the 5 people combined would also block it from continuing around and hitting him. So with loop, the audience is asked again, do you think it's wrong or not wrong for this bystander to switch the switch in the loop example? And I mean, I can ask you the same question, but just spoiler alert, nobody thinks that's wrong either. So this, again, doesn't seem to faze people, at least the majority, when it comes to their moral intuitions. So people think loop, the intervention into loop is not wrong, nor is it wrong in bystander, nor is it wrong in driver. So all sides seem to agree that whatever you got to do to get this trolley to not hit 5 and instead hit 1, it's okay. But if that is true, and people think that it's okay to intervene in the loop situation, then Kant's strategy of solution does not work anymore. Because Kant would have thought that transplant's wrong because the one guy's used as a means. Like I told you, if the guy disappears at the end, you wouldn't have saved 5 lives because the organs are now gone. But with loop, it's like this guy is used as a means in the loop now. Because suppose that at the last moment, again, as the trolley is coming at him, he vanishes from the scene, disappears, he's not on the track. So then what would have happened in the loop case? Well, when it's loop, it wouldn't just be the trolley just keeps going off in a different direction and everyone here is happy and safe. No, if this guy disappears somehow as the trolleys get bearing down on him, then with the loop, it continues around the other side and it just kills 5. So you couldn't save the 5 lives in loop if the one large individual was absent. Okay? So in essence, he is used as a means in loop. But the reaction of the audience doesn't seem to track that because the audience finds this to be morally permissible, unlike transplant. So once again, we are fishing for the right solution. We've gone through 2 that both looked promising at first, but Thomson ultimately just discards them for the reasons mentioned. Foot's solution was the idea that it's worse to kill 5 than 1. But when we replace bystander with driver, bystander's choice is not kill 5 versus 1. It's kill 1 or let 5 die, which is parallel to the example of transplant. But the moral intuitions remain divergent. When we replaced bystander, we thought, okay, well, maybe the Kantian solution is the one that will solve the problem. Because in bystander, the victim that would be hit over here is not used as a means, since his placement on the track is incidental to saving the 5. Unlike the transplant scenario, where the death of the 1 is essential to the operation that would be serviceable to the organs that save the other 5. But when loop replaces bystander, we do not have the feature anymore that his presence on the track is non-essential to saving 5 lives. So now he is used as a means, but no one thinks that this is a thing that's wrong to do. So Kant's solution of means versus not used as a means isn't helping. So therefore, there's a real solution that Thomson thinks she can now finally say. So we've seen a couple of failed attempts. Let's hear Thomson's real strategy to solve the problem. Thomson's solution. Okay, so the author of the paper, Judith Thomson, she is now going to hit us with the real thing, the solution to the trolley problem. And here's what she thinks it is. It's this principle that it is permissible to redirect a threat from a larger to a smaller number of people as long as it is the same threat that's being redirected from the larger to the smaller group. So let me put that here. It is morally permissible to redirect a threat from a larger to a smaller quantity of people. But here's the important qualification. As long as it is the same threat that is being redirected or shifted, whatever. Okay, so let's go back into the cases to see how this solution functions. First of all, question, easy enough. In all the trolley examples, in all the, like whether it's driver, bystander, loop, what is the thing that is the threat to the lives of 5 people in those examples? Like what thing would be the cause of death of the 5 in all the trolley examples? Pretty straightforward, but just to make sure you're on the same page, tell me what you think that answer is. So in other words, what's the threat to the life of 5 people in each trolley example? It is the trolley. That's right, even. Yes. So same, Gabby. Correct. The trolley. The trolley is the good thing that would impact them and be the cause of death. So this oncoming trolley is the threat. Now, say that the driver or the bystander or whoever flips this switch. Okay? They hit the switch. So now the 5 people are not threatened because of the switch being hit. But one person is threatened. Now, what's the threat facing the one person once the switch gets hit? The one person now has a threat of death coming at them, and what is it? In the case of the trolley cases, the threat to the one, the cause of death of the one, like literally, physically, would be what? So the trolley threatens 5, or if you flip the switch, then what threatens 1? Also the trolley, yes, correct. So it's the same trolley is the point. The trolley is going to maybe hit 5 or 1, but it's not a different threatening thing. One and the same identical threat is bound to kill a certain number. And so the question is, how many people will this threat claim? Will it claim 5 or instead 1? But the important point is, it's not a different threat. It's not the establishment of a completely new dangerous threat for the 1. It's just diverting a current threat from a big group to a group that only has a size of 1. So, but then on the other hand, let's go back to transplant. In our transplant situation, what is the threat to the life of 5 people? Like, what would be the cause of their 5 deaths? If the transplant situation is understood, then you can just tell me what thing or factor or cause is a threat to the life of 5 people in the transplant situation. Yes, it's the organs. That's right. Well, Ismail, you're saying trolley, but maybe that was in reference to an earlier question. Yeah, but the failing organs, the natural cause is the cause of death in case the 5 people don't get transplants, right? It was just organ failure, liver failure, heart failure, kidney failure, whatever. So that's the thing threatening their lives, the 5 people that are seeking the transplants in the first place. But suppose this surgeon involves himself taking the action that prevents their death. Well, then what would be the thing threatening the life of 1 victim, not the 5 with the bad organs? But I'm asking you this other question. What's the threat to the life of 1 if the surgeon tries to intervene? Is it organ failure? No. It's the doctor, yes. It's the homicidal doctor. It's the scalpel. It's the act of the doctor that would be the threat to this person's life, not any kind of natural cause. So it's not like when the doctor gets involved, he just transfers the threat of organ failure from this big group to another group. Obviously, that's not even a possible thing to do, but clearly he creates a different threat that's not equivalent to the one faced by the 5. They're facing death by organ failure, and when he gets involved in the situation, he places one person at risk of death from murder. But those are two different threats. So the principle that Thomson thinks that we're sort of kind of intuiting when we react to these examples is that it's okay to shift a threat from a bigger to a smaller group, and it's got to be the same threat. As long as this threat is bound to harm some number of individuals, why should we allow it to hurt the bigger amount? Wouldn't preventing it from having the maximum destructive impact be better? Sure, that's what at least Thomson thinks we're tracking when we react by saying that these interventions into the trolley scenario are not wrong, they're not bad, because you have an out-of-control trolley, and the only question is how many people will the one trolley kill? Will it kill 5? Will it kill 1? It's going to kill some number. Less is better when it comes to death. On the other hand, though, with the transplant case, 5 people are at risk of organ failure, but to try and prevent that, we would have to kill another person. And killing someone is not the same thing as transferring a risk of something from one group to another. So diversion of threat, as long as it's the same threat, doesn't strike most people anyway as a bad or wrong thing to do. And I can give you more realistic examples, like clearly the whole trolley scenario is very weird and unrealistic, but it's just to make a point. We can think of more relatable situations in real life, though, that might be easier to think of in your mind. So suppose this situation plays out. You got a pilot piloting a plane, and it's full of passengers. A lot of people are in the plane, but let's suppose that sadly there's been a malfunction with the engine and it's crashing, and there's no way to regain altitude, so it's going to be a crash landing, and it's going to be a loss. So suppose that the pilot, knowing that there's nothing they can do to make this a survivable crash, is just basically surveying the options on the ground of where to crash land. And if they continue going down in their current spiral, they're going to land in the middle of, I don't know, like Dodger Stadium, where there's supposed packed stadium, 20,000 fans, and that'll be a huge destructive loss of life. The only alternative they have to that is to somehow steer and navigate the crash trajectory towards this other area nearby to that. And suppose that it's a big open field. It's not totally empty. There's like a couple of people there maybe hanging out, playing sports or picnicking, but just a couple dozen. So his only last resort is this. Either the plane continues to crash on its path and it kills a maximum amount, or I steer it over into this field where it's going to kill some people but not quite as many. Most people probably would not find moral fault with the pilot's action if he tried to avert the greater loss of life, because once again, the plane stands as a threat and a risk, but it's the same plane that's either going to hit more or less people. So just trying to cause this one harmful and dangerous thing to descend upon a smaller number of human beings doesn't seem wrong to most people. So diversion of a threat, as long as it's the same threat, no big deal, not really wrong. Transplant's not the diversion of an existing threat. It's the creation of something of a different threat to prevent the existing threat from descending upon 5. Well, there's just this one little last twist to the solution. This is basically it, but there's one additional clause that Thomson says she has to add to make it a perfect solution. So I now have to add one last final amendment to this, and here's what it is. It's morally permissible to redirect a threat from a larger to a smaller number of people, as long as it's the same threat that's being directed, and, so part 2, and as long as the means of redirecting the threat do not violate anyone's important rights. Quote unquote, important rights. Okay, so what about that little last clause at the bottom? It says that, first of all, you got to make sure that the threat is the same threat that's simply being diverted from the bigger to the smaller number of people. But also beyond that, you have to make sure that the way that you divert or redistribute the threat does not itself violate anyone's important rights. To show why this second little clause is needed for the full solution to the problem, we're treated with one last trolley scenario, okay? So I'm gonna have to draw another one. hopefully that's clear enough. We can come back to it if you need further discussion after, but let's go over one more case. The case that we're about to mention here on the board basically shows why she included that additional little element to the solution statement. Okay, so this is her title, okay? I wouldn't use this type of language myself, but just borrowing from the author. She calls the example fat man on the bridge. So here it is, man on the bridge case. So suppose that you have this trolley again, driven by this driver who's passed out, straight going forward on the track, 5 people positioned there. Okay, so the trolley continues, gonna hit all 5, it's gonna kill all 5, which is not what anybody wants. And unfortunately, in this example, there's no separate stretch of the track. So there's no like tangent where you could switch it to that and it would go there instead. So it looks like nothing can be done, but actually there's one option. So there's a bridge in this case. The bridge straddles the trolley. The trolley and the track passes underneath the bridge. So like basically you can walk up on this bridge and look at the trolley passing below from overhead. Suppose that standing on the bridge you have 2 people. Here's one person, and there's another individual, let's say a large gentleman here. Okay. So in the example here, the trolley driver can't do anything. He's passed out. There's no switch anywhere, so there's nothing you can do about switching the trolley. But let's assume there's one action which is possible, and if this action were to be taken by someone here on the scene, it would prevent the trolley from killing all 5 of those people, and instead it would just kill 1. What do you think is the action being hinted at by me here? So one option exists in this hypothetical to avoid the trolley killing 5. What do you think would be the one action? Pushing the big guy off the bridge, right? Yeah. So correct. Yeah, you say blocks the trolley, but by how? Not that he chooses to jump, but that he's pushed by this person. Okay, so imagine that. He pushes the guy, he falls down, then the trolley strikes him, kills him, but he blocks the oncoming trolley from hitting these other 5, and he's like the barrier that stops and shields them from its impact. So, question, would that be wrong or not? And don't overthink it, because I guarantee you that your common sense reaction is probably the universal reaction of almost everybody. But would you say that's wrong or not, to push this guy so that he blocks the trolley? Yeah, wrong. Definitely wrong, and that's what almost everyone thinks. So yes. But here, according to Thomson, is where we've got to pause for a minute and ask, how does that complicate her original solution? Well, that shows you why she had to add that second clause. Because, question, what's the death risk facing these 5 people in the man on the bridge case? Well, it's the trolley. The trolley would kill them if nothing is done. So they're at risk of death by trolley. Now, what would be the threat to this man's life if he's put into the way of the oncoming trolley through the push? Well, don't get it wrong. It's not death by fall, because the bridge, let's assume, is pretty short, and you can easily survive toppling off the bridge. But then a minute later, a second later, it's like push. Whoa, what happened? Oh, then he gets killed by the trolley. Okay, so it's still the same trolley that is either a threat to 5, or if the push happens, to 1. So it's same threat. That looks like it was Thomson's solution, but everyone agrees this is wrong. So Thomson says, but it doesn't check off the second criteria that she adds afterwards. Though it is the same threat, trolley, death by trolley to 5, or death by trolley to 1, though it is the same threat, the way of achieving the diversion of the threat is by means of an action that violates an important right. So just a few questions left. What would be the physical action that would put this man in harm's way if we did something to prevent the trolley from killing 5 in the man on the bridge situation? What action places him in the way of the threat instead of the 5 people in man on the bridge? You can tell me which action. It's the push. Correct. Absolutely. It's the push. If not for the push, he stays on the bridge and watches the trolley go down and hit the people. So it's the pushing action that puts him into harm's way here. But pushing somebody, laying hands on someone, pushing them off a bridge into the path of a trolley so they'll die, that is a violation of an important right, because I hope you agree that you have a right not to be pushed, just in general. Like, people can't just push you even just on the street, but certainly people can't push you in a way that's going to lead to your death. So if you have rights to anything, then certainly you have a right against assault, and you have a right against invasion of your body by other people. So if the only way you can get this guy in harm's way is through pushing him physically, that's not okay, because the way you shift the burden of the threat matters. Not just that it's the same threat, but the way that you redirect it. So if the only means of redirection is through an assault, that's not okay. But in the other trolley cases, driver, bystander, loop, in those other three cases, what physical action achieves the redirection of the threat from 5 to 1? Okay, because in those cases, there's no push of a person. But what basically is the action that that diverts the threat in the other three trolley cases? So tell me that. Not pushing someone, not pushing a person, but touching a switch, right? Pulling a lever or hitting a switch. And hitting a switch just in and of itself, just looking at that action with no context, you would say hitting a switch is not something that violates any important rights. But if all you know is someone pushed someone else, even if you don't know the broader context, you know that it's not okay for someone to be pushed against their will. So it has to be the same threat. But even if it's the same threat, like here, it's not okay to divert such a threat or shift it by means of an action which violates an important right. So if all you got to do to flip this, to switch the threat is to touch a switch, okay, touching a switch is not a violation by itself of an important right. But if the diversion of threat requires that you assault a person, push them, etc., then that is not an acceptable means of diversion of threat. So even if it's the same threat, it's wrong because it fails the second clause there. Okay? Now, as I've taught this so many times, I've come up with some examples that I think are a little more relatable. Not to say I find fault at all with the methodology of using, very out there thought experiments to make a moral point or a conceptual argument. That's nothing problematic. But for your purposes, I want it to be something you can kind of think through in other ways too. So let me give you one slightly different example, okay? It's much more realistic. Let's consider a case of like soldiers fighting in war. Okay, now I want you to imagine this situation. You've got 6 different soldiers that are all inside of a bunker. And suppose that inside of the bunker, what do you know, but a live grenade is lobbed in by like an enemy. Okay, so once that grenade is in this bunker, it's a certain threat. It's a clear threat of death to all the soldiers inside. If it detonates, if this live grenade blows up, it'll kill all 6, let's say. Okay, now, let's suppose that there's no available means to simply toss the grenade out. It's such a deep trench that you just, it wouldn't make it to the top or whatever. So then, what's an action that might be possible which would cause the one threatening grenade to no longer be a threat of death for all 6 soldiers, but just one of them? Can you think of a scenario like that? A situation in which the grenade's in there, oh no, what to do? We're all going to get blown up. What could be something that takes this grenade, instead of threatening all 6 of them in there, to just threatening one of them in there? Let me know if you can think of that. So jump on it. Okay, good. Fair enough. Cover it with the body. So suppose that one person takes the ultimate act of self-sacrifice, and they throw themselves on top of this explosive, like you've maybe seen in certain movies, and maybe it's happened in real life, probably, with breadth of experience that's happened in the past. So anyway, someone throws themselves on it. Now, do you think that would be acceptable morally? I don't think that anyone could find fault with that, because you know that the grenade is a threat to everybody. And if we can be a threat to fewer, then when someone voluntarily just jumps on it, you wouldn't look at them and say, shame on you, that's wrong, this is immoral, why are you jumping on that? It's not okay for you to divert this threat from 6 to 1 by means of a voluntary action. But, okay, there's another way of diverting this grenade from being a threat to all 6 to just being a threat to one of them that would not be morally acceptable. Okay, so if someone jumps on it, okay, that's fair enough. The means of diversion there is the voluntary act of allowing yourself to be the victim. through your choice. But what do you think would be an impermissible, immoral way of getting that one grenade to threaten just one party in the group of 6? So, what do you think would be a way of getting the one grenade not to harm all 6, but just one? But this would be a means of redirecting the threat that would not be okay. So push another person onto the grenade. That's right, Tina. Yeah. So, that's not the same thing as, all right, guys, I'm jumping on this. Back up. I'm going to take the brunt of the explosive. You're totally within your rights to do that, because that doesn't violate anyone's rights if you're the one who authorizes and chooses for yourself to be the noble act of self-sacrifice. But to volunteer someone else against, that's not volunteering, right? So to assault someone and be like, oh no, this grenade, you can't have this. Okay, I'm sorry, but 1 instead of 6, that's what it has to be. Get down there, hold them down. Right? Now, if you had to push someone against their will on top of the grenade and force them to be this chosen sacrifice for the other 6, then sure, it is the same threat, death by grenade for 6 versus death by grenade for 1. But even though it's the same threat, it's not okay to redirect it by means of an action that violates the important right of this person not to be assaulted against their will. So diversion of threat is okay, but the way that you affect the redistribution of the threat is also a morally relevant factor. So those two things both have to come together. It has to be redirection of threat, but not by means that themselves constitute the violation of an important right. So pushing someone on top of that grenade is not okay, even though it achieves the same goal, 1 instead of 6. A voluntary act is not the same as an act that recruits someone else against their will into service. So that would be my way of kind of making the same point as man on the bridge, because in this man on the bridge case, the trolley threatens either 6 or 1, but the action that causes it to threaten 1 is the act of pushing them, which is a violation of a right. In the other trolley cases, when 1 merely touches the switch, the action of touching the switch doesn't strike us is in itself a violation of an important right. So that is an acceptable means of diversion, unlike the act of pushing. So that's really about it for the trolley problem. This is her ultimate final solution to the problem. But in my view, there's also some interesting discussion at the end about what important rights are and what the scope of the word important rights entails. She leaves that as something for the individual reader of the article to judge on their own. So how important of a right does it have to be for a means of diversion that involves that type of action to be impermissible? Certainly assault by pushing would strike us as an important right, and I think we can all agree with that. But what if the right is just the right not to be lied to or something? Like earlier, you told the one guy on the other side, hey, you know what, Mr. Track Worker? We studied the trolley problem in college, and I'm telling you right now, straight up, promise, put it on everything, that if this ever happened in real life, I would never send the trolley over to you. If you were the one guy up there and I was at the switch, look at me, I'm promising you I would not send it to you. You just promised, person to person, give them your word. Suppose that then you're on the scene later on, and you're like, I can't believe this is really happening. And the scene starts to unfold just as the essay has said. Do you think that having promised the person that you would never do this, that makes it impermissible for you now to hit the switch, sending it in their direction? So she says no view of this dominates. Some people will say rights against promise breaking are serious enough that obligates you to not flip the switch. Other people would say, yeah, normally promises are important and holding them is important, but when life and death is on the line, it's time to break a promise and just, flip the switch anyway. I don't know about me. I guess I would feel very weird and awkward doing it after I had promised. And certainly the one victim would be like, what the hell? How is this trolley coming at me? You really? You promised me, boom, and then they get hit by it. But anyway, these are just a couple of random extra examples. Another case is, what if it's property rights that have to be violated in order to divert this threat? So you get to the switch, you're the bystander, and it says, hey, private property, no trespassing, do not touch this switch. Property of track worker up on track B. So now not only do you have to trespass, pop a little light fence or something, but it's the property of the guy who you're flipping the switch towards. Does this make this situation such that it's wrong? Or do you feel that property rights are not that important? And so comparatively, if you had to assault someone to divert the threat, that would be wrong, but not violation of a property right. It just depends on how you individually determine the scope of important rights and how far that extends. But those are just some minor extra details. The solution remains viable regardless of whether we debate what important rights are. So basically, long story short, why is it that most people find that it's okay for bystander, loop, and driver to flip the switch, but not acceptable for transplant to get involved and kill 1 and save 5. Because in transplant, it's a different threat that the 1 would face instead of the 5. It's like natural causes versus murder. With driver, bystander, and loop, it's one and the same trolley. That's either going to go towards 5 or go towards 1. So the act of diverting this threat is not the creation of a new threat. And then furthermore, when it's merely flipping a switch that achieves this result, that is not by itself an act that violates an important right. So yeah, that's about it, I guess, for today's meeting. We've covered this trolley problem in, I think, sufficient detail. So keep in mind that I have sent off the study guide for the midterm review session and next week's midterm. And I told you just a little earlier this afternoon that I finally finished your grading of your first essay. So as the requests for grades roll in, I'll be answering them through the week. Just make sure you're patient enough to give me a few days because I have a lot of emails that I'm all going through. But with no further delay, I'll get to you within 48 hours most. So when you're ready for your grade, please ask me by email, and I'll be replying to you in a few days at the most. So all right, everybody, let's just get ready then for the midterm review session on Wednesday. Take a good look at the study guide and kind of come prepared with questions that you might want to deal with, and we'll go over as many of them as we can in our 75-minute period on Wednesday. And then I guess I'll just see you guys for the midterm next week, and we'll be in touch about the method of taking it. You're going to take it through, I'm just going to send it through Titanium, and then you're simply going to send me back your completed midterm as an attached document to my email. So you'll send it via email to rvulich@fullerton.edu. But all right, guys, thanks a lot. Did I say I got the first dose of the corona vaccine this weekend? I did. I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but it was nice to get that over with. It's nice to have part 1 out of the way. Injection number 2, I guess, is scheduled for April the 3rd. But I'm feeling great. I mean, there's no side effects, at least to me. So yeah, don't worry about all that if you've heard anyone complain about it. There's a little bit of soreness in the arm, I guess, but that's already gone. No other issues, no headaches or anything. So maybe I'm just lucky. But I did not notice any side effects at all. And it does feel good to know that we'll be able to be back in person and doing a lot of normal stuff in the fall. But anyways then, thanks so much again. And I will certainly be in touch with you guys. I'll see you and we'll talk on Wednesday. Okay, thanks again. See you, bye.